Welcome back to another episode of Dying Out Loud. I'm Kris Saim and I'm your host. Today, my guest is my great friend and adopted sister, Amy. Today, this episode is going to celebrate our 30 plus year friendship that started on a retail sales floor and grew into chosen family. Through love, loss, adventure, parenting, and professional pivots, Amy and I have remained tethered by care, history, and the sacred space of being fully known. This episode is a tribute to all the people we meet at work who change our lives forever. Amy, welcome.
Hi, good. Thank you.
So I want to go all the way back to the days at the Buckle and just kind of revisit our first memories of meeting each other. I know that I was a fashion disaster, and I also was probably not mentally prepared for everything I was going to learn at the Buckle. But definitely having someone who was going through the same kind of things in terms of trying to grow their early career, I think we found so much in each other that we appreciated and that just allowed us to relate to each other. It sealed the deal for me pretty early that I knew this was going to be a person that not only did I want to be friends with, but I also just really enjoyed spending time with you. But I'd love to hear your first thoughts, like what was going through your head when we met and anything that you can recall from those days at the Buckle.
Yeah, gosh, I feel like the first early memories have are just, you were kind of like a kind of a, just this big teddy bear who was always smiling and giggling and just eager to learn and laughed a lot. And I don't know, I feel like you said, we really vibed off of each other and helped each other with putting outfits together for guests and even through meetings and whatnot. I think, I don't know, we just really worked well together.
I definitely agree. Things that stand out vividly in my mind were certainly the times where we were comparing notes about other people that worked in the store with us,
Yes.
and something that also comes up. I mean, almost the second that I think about you or about reaching out to you is the word grapes. Do you
Yes.
remember why that might be significant?
And do you?
Of course I do.
Well, no, I do. I remember, I feel like if I can go back in the cobwebs in my brain, I don't know, were there like a fake grape? No, I don't know. Like we would say grapes or like, I don't know.
Yeah. I was actually eating grapes for lunch
Uh-huh.
in like a little one of those Tupperware things that had like four things in it, and I was eating grapes, and I think I said I love grapes, and I said it like I think whenever I said grapes, like I inflected the word, and then you're like grapes, and then like from that moment on, like you just called me grapes every once in a
I
while, and it was
know.
hilarious because it reminded me of that time sitting. I actually think we were sitting in the office whenever that first came about. I can see it quite vividly, although I don't remember what either of us were wearing. I remember that we were both sitting in the office together,
Yeah.
and there were literally grapes in the picture.
Yes, I do remember that. And like your inflection, and like every time I would say it, you would say it pretty funny. And then I also
Yep.
remember like going upstairs to the food court. And I don't know, I remember getting like Long John Silver's or something. And you like
Yep.
eat my hush puppies or something. Does that ring a
I
bell?
love
Like
hush puppies.
I
Of
know, and I
course that
can't
rings a bell.
stand them. And I'm like, okay. And he's just, you kept saying, how can you not like hush puppies? I'm like,
They're so good.
nasty.
Well, we obviously learned a lot about each other working in that store together, but I don't think either of us was prepared for what we were going to learn about each other and life and just about caring for another adult as much as we did whenever we both hit the road and went to open stores in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
For
I
me, that was Cape
agree.
Girardeau, Missouri. And for you, that was Paducah.
I
What
know.
stands out about those days to you?
Gosh, just, well, I was so grateful that Cape Girardeau, because you left before me. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then found out
Same.
I was getting my own store. And luckily, it was so close. I mean, I feel like Cape Girardeau was not even but an hour away, maybe.
Yeah.
It was
I think
pretty,
like an hour and 15 minutes just because part of it was back roads. But
yeah.
in terms of how close it was to other stores, we were the closest stores to each other.
Yeah, I was so grateful. And I feel like we always made fun, like, you're like Cape Girardeau, the minimum age is like 100, and I'm like, Paducah, Kentucky, people don't even know their left hand from their right hand. Like, we would always kind of make fun of just the idiosyncrasies of the cities. And thankfully, we saw each other a lot and kept in contact. And just with life events and how I landed in, Paducah, and then me leaving Paducah and moving back to
I
Kansas.
remember that quite well. As a
Yeah.
matter of
You
fact,
taking
the
my
first time I
test.
ever met your dad was because of that move away from Paducah.
Right.
And we actually ended up all spending the night in the same hotel room. Do you remember that?
I don't know if I remember that or not.
You and your dad slept on one side, and I think Lisa and I slept on the other side
Oh,
of the like two double beds in a hotel room. And that was the first time we met him, and it was because of the move away from Paducah that happened. But I remember coming to your apartment there and helping, get the last of the things out of there, and just getting you out of that environment. And I mean, that I definitely feel like it's one of those things. Well, it's definitely not a memory that, brings a smile to my
right.
face. What does put a smile on my face is the fact that we were close enough to each other that I was able to help out during that time in your life. So I'm very thankful that that was the case. And I certainly think that, you know, especially as someone who believes that everything happens for a reason, that part of the reason that we both ended up in those stores was because later on down the road there was going to be a bump or two, and we were going to need each other to get through the bump or two that happened.
Right. And you
So
took my
yeah,
cats.
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
You should help me move,
So
and here are some cats.
yeah, just take care of them. Things like that, they definitely stand out. Another thing that stands out to me is I remember when you lost your dad, and, certainly remember, what that was like for you. And, I think that probably my relationship with you was probably one of the reasons that, gosh, I didn't just completely shut down when my dad passed away. I remember the strength that you got through that with, and I mean, really how you kind of assumed some responsibility for your mom at that point in time. I have had to do the same thing, and it's an interesting thing to have in common, I think, for people, and is something that isn't lost on me, that, being an adult with, mature adult friendships, that's part of the reality, right? The older that we get, the more we are going to experience loss, and having people that understand that and also understand us and who we are and where we've come from can be like a make or break factor in, how well someone moves past something like that. Anything that you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I agree. I think that, after moving back, after leaving Paducah, I mean, you stayed in Cape Girardeau still, I don't even remember how long, for a while before,
Too long.
yeah, before coming back to Kansas City. And I mean, I just feel like with all the changes, whether it was relationship or death or whatever, we still stayed in contact because we did have that. close relationship that, there aren't many people I feel in my experience that, you can, put down the phone or be done with a text and then get back with them, whatever, 6 months later or however long, and you just start up as if there was no time lapse.
Uh, Exactly. And I definitely feel that same way. What do you think is that force that keeps bringing us back together through, those times where we've had like a silent period or, and I know that life has been the factor that has kind of pulled us in different directions, but what do you think is the force that keeps bringing us back together?
I don't know. I just think, I mean, I sometimes think that this word is used too much, but I'm going to use it anyways. I think it's just about authentic relationships, non judgmental, not being afraid to be vulnerable and just, I just, I don't know. I think that there are a few, just a handful of people that you can be that way. And to me, I think that that's what it's about. Like, I feel like, you probably know, more about me and my family and, just the behind the scenes stuff that a lot of people wouldn't know. And you just, sit and listen and aren't judgmental, you know?
You know, that non-judgmental piece is a really important piece to me as well because you are one of a limited number of people that I was great friends with before I came out, and you were one of the first few people that learned once I did come out. And when I did come out, I actually lived with your mom in Overland Park, and she sort of became kind of like a surrogate mother for me, and that worked so well because I already viewed you as like the sister that I didn't have that I always wanted. And here your mother was. I actually think your mom was probably the second person that I came out to, and her response was okay. And then we just continued on our
That's
conversation like that wasn't like the biggest piece of news that had ever been dropped on her table,
right.
which actually put that into perspective for me in such a tremendous way because it was easy to pick up the phone and then call you and tell you. After that, I'm like, okay, well, if your mom is this loving and accepting, then I know you're going to be the same way. And of course, that's exactly how you were. And that definitely means the world. And I can probably count on one or two hands the number of people that have seen me through really all the major phases of my life, and you are absolutely one of them. And probably a good source of reality and also a good anchor for me, for reality, like a good reality check. And I've always appreciated that about you. You've never been the kind of person that, just will say things because you think that's what people want to hear. You say the good and the bad, and I think that's what a real true friendship is, not being afraid to, tell somebody maybe you should think of it this way or look at it that way. And I've always valued that in you. It goes back to that authenticity that you talked about earlier. It's such a huge piece of a real relationship that can stand the test of time and can also survive those moments of silence as we each individually lean into the lives that we have built. So it absolutely has been a great thing to look back on. And whenever I think about how long we've been friends and all of the changes that life have thrown both of our ways, I'm pretty proud of the fact that we're able to still be here today having this conversation. And kind of looking back fondly, we probably can both agree that if you collectively look at all the years that we've been friends, not all of them have been great ones. And there were certainly times where each of us was kind of buried in our own, traumatic experience. But,
Yes.
we have definitely come out on the other side of that. And we've done it in a way that it's not just, lent itself to our survival, but also I think it has created, some really amazing things that, each of us has grown and evolved into. And, the space that we're taking up here, I think is, we've successfully raised two kids apiece, and, they're going on about their lives and starting to make their own lives, and we can be proud of that. And we both have found a great partner in life, and not everybody gets to experience that whenever they get to the ripe old age that you and I have gotten to.
I agree. I agree. But you're so much younger than I am.
So much, so much. You can tell by my gray hair and my gray beard. So every episode, Amy, I always take a little bit of time to just share a message that I have written to the guests that I have on the show. And this episode is no different. So if you'll bear with me for just a few minutes, I'm actually going to read this because I don't want to lose any of the sentiment that I have here. So, Amy, you have been the sister I didn't grow up with, but somehow found exactly when I needed her. From our trips to the hills of the Midwest, to hotel rooms, to heartbreaks and healing, you've seen all the versions of my life and loved me, or at least tolerated me, through all of them. I don't know how to explain the kind of comfort I feel when we reconnect, except to say it feels like home, like something I didn't know I still needed until I heard your voice, or I pictured your voice in my head as I read a text message from you. You've been a constant for me, even in the seasons when we weren't talking. Your love, your family, and your loyalty have been a part of my life's foundation. I thank you so much for always showing up for me, and I love you. You have been an amazing friend and sister to have in this life.
Oh my God.
All right.
I'm wiping away tears and
I'm
getting a
sorry.
Kleenex.
No worries. Please go ahead. I've been sniffling back my tears if you haven't picked up on that. So I'll let that sink in for just a moment. And then I'm going to actually kick it over to you and just ask if there's anything that you want to share or ask, or a message that you just really want to land with the folks that are listening.
Yeah, and I'm reading some notes that I had written down. I guess one of my biggest, well, I have a few questions. I know that you and I have been in past significant relationship that had many years of our lives, and now that we're older and whatnot, and then have really now truly felt like we have found our person later on in life. How do you not like, how do you, because of your cancer diagnoses, how do you not obsess about finding Anthony not so late in life, but I guess so late in life, and thinking, gosh, I wish I would have met him in my 20s because I've got all these friends that are like, oh, I'm on my whatever 30th year anniversary. And,
Right.
and even, when I got married in October, that was one of my, and I still kind of obsess about it. Like, here I am in my mid 50s. I found, my person finally. And I feel like I have to rush to make all these memories to make up for my time lost, which is obviously different than, you know, I don't know. How do you not, I guess, obsess about like maybe not having as much time as you think, you might
Yeah.
making any sense? I'm not really.
Yeah, that no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, ultimately, there are certainly days whenever I do obsess about things like that, like, oh, I wish we could have done this together, or I wish we could have done that together. But the way that I tend to look at it, it's really much the same way I look at having these conversations. I could have chosen not to have these conversations or to deliver them in a different way. But ultimately, I thought that there would be more to it than just, saying the words. And if there are lessons that people can gain from hearing, you know, the stories of my relationships, the way that, friends, family, coworkers have really impacted my life, that might be, a catalyst for someone who has been, not saying, I love you, I'm sorry, I forgive you, those types of things. And when I look at, finding the right partner late in life, I kind of view it with that same lens. Like, there are so many things that we are going to get to experience that are a first, and I tend to lean a lot into those. And we both went into this knowing, we got engaged after I got my stage 4 diagnosis. We got married after I got my stage 4 diagnosis. We just celebrated our 1 year anniversary. I'm still doing chemo. We went into this knowing that the time that we have left could be fairly limited. And quite honestly, in the early days of this diagnosis, we thought we were looking at something like 9 months to 2 years. So, in that period of time, we didn't do a whole lot of things. We weren't working on crossing off a bucket list. We were making sure that I was able to show up for chemo every 2 weeks. But in doing that, we have certainly made the most of every opportunity. And, that's certainly what I would recommend to anyone is focus less on the fact that, you know, you took a whole lifetime to find this person and to marry this person, and to know that whether you have a day or a decade or 4 decades left, that you just have to make the most of every single day. And that doesn't mean that we go out and we do something fun and exciting every single day. That might mean we just sit next to each other and, hold hands on the couch, which quite often, because I am doing chemo, that's usually what we do, right? We just sit next to each other, we enjoy each other's companies. We still get on each other's nerves, just like, every married couple. But those things like come and go so fast because we both understand like the reality that we're facing is that we won't get like a 10-year anniversary or a 20-year anniversary. So, celebrating a 1 year anniversary or a 1.5 year anniversary, I mean, we might do silly things like that and make huge deals out of them. Anthony just turned 40 this past week, and, we didn't have a huge like showboaty party. We had, like 8 people at our house, some family and a couple of friends. And I mean, that was everything that we needed to acknowledge, the big milestone 40th birthday. And that was enough. And, we were in bed at a decent hour and we got up the next morning and made the most of the day after. And I think that is kind of our commitment to each other is, right now we're just going to, you know, do things that we're passionate about, which is kind of why we started this podcast. It's kind of a group venture. And I think that's the way that we approach most everything at this point in time. So, just live like every minute is the one that matters, and it doesn't have to be a focus like every minute could be your last, but every minute that you've got, especially when you're in the same room or under the same roof with your partner, your husband in both of our cases, those moments are important. So you just try to do whatever you can do to get those laughs and and be silly and have those moments. And in mixed up in there, maybe there's a couple of big like aha things, like an amazing vacation. But I spend, I think, a lot more time these days worrying about, will he be taken care of after I'm gone, as opposed to I'm not really making the most of the time that we have together, because I really do feel like we do a great job of making sure we're capitalizing on the time that we've been afforded.
That's good. And then I guess I just wrote, "Are you scared?" That's a
You
really
know,
big question. That's a pretty general
I
question.
no, but you know that I have an answer for it, believe it or not, because I'm not anymore. I was terrified the first 6 months to the point where come to the end of that 6 months, I literally remember having a conversation in my own head, like I was just ready to go to sleep that night and not wake up the next day. And I feel like if I would have just stopped right there with that conversation, I probably would have gone to sleep that night and not woke up the next day. But instead, I'm like, well, what's the alternative? The alternative is I wake up tomorrow, and regardless of how I feel, I try to recapture some of the positive energy that I've carried with me throughout my entire life. And I'll tell you what, I made it through elementary school, junior high school, and high school being in the closet and having people making fun of me every single day. If I was able to survive that, then I can handle anything that my health throws at me. And, I don't really think about like being scared anymore. As a matter of fact, I mean, I know exactly how I want to die at this point. I've voiced that to everyone. And I think that, if I'm lucky enough, that's the way I'm going to pass. And it's going to be exactly what I've envisioned. And everyone will be prepared for it. And it doesn't mean that they won't be heartbroken and that they won't shed tears. But there are so many videos and pictures, and now we have these podcast conversations that live, audibly and also in a video format. I mean, all of these things that can remind people of the great times that we were able to have and how we showed up for each other. And for that, I think that probably is the part that I would have been most scared of. But, through things like this, I can kind of cross those things off my list and make sure that they're not factors that I have to worry about or anybody else has to worry about for that matter. Those were great questions. Thanks for asking them.
You're welcome.
So, as we wrap up here today, folks, I'm going to just close this out in a very similar way to most episodes. The way that we meet people and the people that we meet along the way can change everything. Some of us start out meeting on a sales room floor. We move across the country together, and then we move back home together. But the people that are in those situations, they can become our sisters. They can become our safe place and our history keepers. If you've got someone in your life that has been that person for you, you should tell them today. Let them know that they matter today and let them know why they've mattered all along. Because that kind of connection, that's the one that we're here for. And this moment is the moment that we should make that known. As always, just say the thing you need to say today. And we'll catch you next week. Thanks, everyone.